So I have been learning to sew. Throughout September, I was taking sewing classes every Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. in the Garment District here in New York City. So I'm going to tell you the who, what, when, where, why, starting with the why. Why have I been learning to sew? Sewing is actually something that I've always wanted to learn. Especially since fashion is such a big pillar on this channel, if I'm going to be making fashion recommendations to you all, I feel like I should have some sort of credibility and knowledge behind it. I also love learning new things. You guys know, if you've been following this channel for a while, I've dabbled in French classes, photography, videography, learning about fine thin hair, going to Fashion Week, educating myself more about fashion. I love learning new things. There's something about sewing as well, it's just very tied into fashion. I'm also a very crafty girl and a very creative person. A lot of my creativity comes out in my video editing, but I also love doing things that are crafty with my hands, that are girly and related to fashion. I just feel like sewing kind of combines all those things. It's also a fun hobby. It's something to do with your hands. It's away from technology and all of my various screens, so it kind of feels like a little bit therapeutic in a way, just because I spend all of my a lot of my life in front of my computer screen for my 9-to-5 job, and then I'm spending time outside of my job in front of a camera, or I'm scrolling on my phone, or I'm doing, watching videos or laptop time. A lot of our lives are just related to technology and screens, but sewing is some time away from that, and it's not even like watching TV or anything. That's another screen. It's just, I think, a fun hobby that I've been looking for in my life. I also love hobbies that make you feel like you have a sense of accomplishment. I think that people who have, say, exercise or some form of sport that they do is a similar feeling, and I do have that too. I have my exercise part of my life that I love doing, and dance, you guys know, everything like that. But I think of this in the same realm as that, in terms of the sense of accomplishment that you feel from doing it. Once you've finished it, especially with something like sewing, you can hold it in your hands and say wow, I made this. I actually accomplished putting this together. It also makes you think a little bit, because you have to think about the measurements, and which, the math part isn't so fun for me because I don't really like math, but I do like thinking about what fabrics am I gonna get, what colors am I gonna put together, and sort of putting together a mood board of all these ideas. It's also a very useful skill to have if I, say, have a piece of clothes where the straps are a little bit too long, and now I know how to just adjust the strap and sew it on. If I get a rip in something, I can sew it back together. Or if I wanted to make my own clothes or make my own things, it's totally is a useful skill to have as well. Also, living in New York City, there is so much history with sewing and fashion and being in the Garment District, and I love that I have that at my disposal, and I really wanted to take advantage of it. I've always wanted to immerse myself in that world a bit more, and I just feel like this is going to help me with learning more about fashion, really understanding and appreciating how garments are made, learning about the fabrics, learning about different textiles and design methods and sketching and mood boarding, and all these things will just, I don't know, really help me learn. And I always love learning and growing. I feel like that's a thing that we tend to say a lot at work, in our in our jobs, but it's truly honestly real for me. In real life, I just want to grow and evolve as a person all the time, like a little butterfly. But coming back to the Garment District stuff, I did a video during Fashion Week where I went into the Garment District and I interviewed a designer, and it was really cool to see where he worked and where his studio was, and go behind the scenes of the fashion show and understanding what his inspiration was for his collection, and seeing all of the mannequins and the sewing machines and all the fabrics and all of the threads all on the wall. So then to give you the specifics of the where and when, so in the garment district, I went to a place called the New York Sewing Center. They have classes for adults and they also have classes specifically for kids as well, but anyone can take them. My class had a lot of variants of ages and people with all different types of jobs and backgrounds. There was software engineers in my class and then there were people who worked for like major fashion groups who were in my class, and it's honestly just all a range. I started with their Sewing 101 class, so that really gave the basics of sewing, like how to thread a sewing machine, how to use a sewing machine. We made a drawstring bag as our first project, and then we picked a pattern, we learned how to use patterns, and then of that pattern that we picked, actually made a garment at the end. So you could either choose a skirt or pants. I chose a skirt, a mini skirt to be exact. So I made it. I have it somewhere here, but I'm going to show you all that in these clips. We're going to go into actually the first 1 and 2 days of my classes in a second. We also learned things about how much fabric should cost, because apparently you can get ripped off, also where to buy fabric, so it sounds like you need to negotiate a little bit. There's just so much to it that I am absolutely just loving. But yeah, let's just jump into day 1 and 2 of me going to sewing classes for the first time. So this is my first day starting the sewing classes. I'm kind of nervous. Time now, I want to tell you what my thoughts were after day 1 of sewing. So after day 1, I was feeling really good. I had never used a sewing machine before in my life. When I was a kid, my mom taught me how to hand sew, and she did have a sewing machine. I remember her making me these colorful scrunchies as a kid, and so I'd learned how to hand sew, but I never actually had used a sewing machine before, and I was pretty intimidated by it. But I quickly learned in the class like that really it's nothing to be intimidated about. There are a lot of different steps, I realized, to it, of just remembering, you know, how to do it. But I think once you kind of understand and get it, it all makes sense, and once you've done it so many times, it's like second nature. I take very, very meticulous notes, so before the first day of class, I had printed out the syllabus, and on the back of the syllabus, after the teacher would have us come up, watch her do it, I would go back and I would write down by hand everything that I just saw in like my own internal language, in terms of saying like, okay, I don't remember what she called the like silver square thing, so instead of saying the actual term for it, I wrote down like, put the thread around the silver square thing that's on top of the thing. Like, it all made sense to me in my head, and I am so glad that I did that, because when I ended up going back for future classes, I didn't refer to the notes that were in the syllabus. I referred to my own notes, because that was what helped me actually learn it. And I think that there's something in that of writing it down in your own way of thinking that really just helps it stick and helps you understand. And then once you get comfortable with it, then like learning the actual terms later. At least that's how it worked for me. But so far after the first class, I was feeling like, I can tell I'm really going to like this. I also love how many accessories are involved, from the fabric scissors, the tomato pin cushion, all the different color pins, elastic, all the different color threads, chalk, the ruler, bobbins. And I just love how many endless possibilities there are of what you can make with just what is right in front of you. So after day one, where we learned the sewing machine basics, we started learning how to make our first project, which was the drawstring bag. So now we're gonna go back to day 2 of the sewing class and finish making the bag and restring the bobbin again and restring the sewing machine again. We learned how to use a pattern and properly cut fabric. Alright, so for my next class I have to pick up some fabric, which is really exciting. I'm making a skirt, and they recommended that we go to Mood Fabrics, which if you've ever seen Project Runway, you'll know that Mood is where they went on the show to get all of their fabric. So I'm really excited to check this out. I'm sure it'll be a little bit overwhelming, but let's do it. I think it set in a little bit more, and I started realizing just how much there is to learn. The concept that trips me up a little bit at this point was a bias cut, but I ended up going home and watching a bunch of YouTube videos on a bias cut, and I get it now. But it was interesting to me how when cutting the patterns, you have to like make sure that the fabric is correct and that you're doing it parallel to the selvage. I also realized that all of the old patterns, like old patterns that you can get, the instructions are just a little bit outdated, and I don't know if they're really going to change them that much in terms of like the sizing and the measurements and like the calculations. You kind of have to like recalculate it all, and that I think is also a little bit hard for me. Also, accounting for the sizing system that they had back then is not the same as the sizing if you were to buy a shirt online today. So you're gonna like have to match it up. You also need to account for ease. There is just so much to learn, but I am really loving it, and having this kind of hobby outside of work that's related to my interests is just really fun for me. But I hope that you liked this video. I'm going to turn it into a new series called the Sewing Series. And let me know in the comments if you sew, or if you had a mother, a grandmother, someone in your life who sewed. There were so many people in my class who told a story of, say, like there was one woman whose grandmother like worked in the garment district, and it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things that like throughout history I think you can kind of connect with, and I find that people have such great stories. Like even just yesterday, spoiler alert, I bought a sewing machine. A maintenance guy had to come into our apartment just to like fix something with the filters, and he saw the sewing machine and he was like, oh, and then he started telling me about his grandmother and the sewing machine that she had. So if you have any stories like that, I would love to hear them in the comments. So yeah, comment down below, let me know what your thoughts are, and subscribe so that you don't miss the other parts of this series. I'm thinking I'll make it like a Thursday video type thing. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Follow the Fashion Squirrel as well over on Instagram as always, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.